a single cough. That was all it took. One dry, shallow sound in the dim glow of a cramped wooden hut. By dawn, the woman who had coughed lay cold. By dusk, her husband joined her in the grave, and within a week, the village bell tolled so ceaselessly they tied a rope to it. No hand needed to pull. In the Middle Ages, a cough was not just a noise, it was a death sentence. In that shadowed world, certain sounds made men freeze. The clang of the plague bell, the howl of wind through bare trees, the crackle of a hungry fire. But none struck deeper terror than a cough in the dark, because that sound meant something had slipped into the room. Something unseen, something that could steal a child before morning. They named it in whispers. The winter breath, the black spit, the wasting. Learned men called it bethesis, or consumption. But peasants knew it by a simpler, crueler word, death. Houses were small, walls thin. Families slept tangled together beneath threadbare cloaks. They breathed the same air, shared the same blankets. So when one coughed, the others followed, like echoes down a stone hallway. No one coughed alone. In 1348, a monk in York wrote, "We hear them cough at matins, and by vespers the straw bed is empty. It's as children fell first, then the mothers, then the old." There were no masks, no medicines, no refuge, only prayers, and sometimes not even those. The very houses conspired against them. Medieval huts were not built for health. They were built to trap warmth and smoke. Peasants lived in single-room hovels, walls of wattle and daub, roofs of mouldering thatch. The floor was dirt, the windows mere slits, and in the centre, an open hearth with no chimney, only flames licking the air, smoke curling into the rafters. It blackened the beams, it choked the lungs, it mingled with the cough. Masked it, made it worse. Soot-coated throats. Breathing felt like swallowing dust. In winter, windows were sealed with rags or dung to keep out the cold. But they also sealed the sickness inside. Beds were sacks of damp straw. Blankets were moth-eaten cloaks or stiff animal hides. Families slept piled together, even the livestock for warmth. Air did not flow here, it festered. One cough could drift from child to sister, from sister to father. By the time anyone noticed, the damage was done. The hearth could warm bones, but it could not stop death's cold breath from creeping in. They did not know of germs. They knew breath, smell, the shift of seasons, the weight of sin. Illness was not a microbe. It was a curse, a punishment, a shadow slipping in at dusk. Some said it rode in on the fog. Others swore it perched on the wings of crows. Many blamed the stars, or God's wrath, or the fetid swamp beyond the village. But most feared miasma, rotten air. If you could smell it, it could kill you. They hung herbs from the rafters, sage, rosemary, thyme. They burned dried flowers in clay bowls. They stuffed garlic under beds, inside boots, behind doors. Priests demanded confessions. Doctors prescribed bloodletting. Barbers sliced veins to drain the bad humours. And when all else failed, they clutched charms, a tiny cross, a pouch of ashes, a dried toad sewn into a cloth bag and pressed to the chest. They feared what they could not see, and they saw death often. A 14th century friar wrote, "The cough visits the sinner first, then the devout, but it spares no house in the end. Children and the elderly never stood a chance. The young, barefoot, half-starved, ribs sharp beneath thin skin, ran through mud, slept in smoke, caught colds that never left. Sometimes they simply stopped breathing before dawn. The old fared no better, joints stiff from labour, lungs weary from decades of winters. When the cough found them, it settled in. A mother in 1391 scrawled in her prayer book, "I covered his mouth with my hand, so his sister wouldn't catch it. But the heat of him burned into my palm. There was no milk to nourish, no doctor to call, only bitter herbs, damp cloths, and waiting. When death took a child, it came softly, shallow breaths, then silence. When it took the old, it was slower. A cough that rattled the ribs, nights spent gasping, mornings where the ailing did not rise. No one was surprised, but no one grew used to it. It never began with a scream, only a cough. Always a cough, from the corner of a tavern, from a bed by the fire, from a cart returning from market. Within days, the baker was gone. The priest no longer rang the bell. The blacksmith's hammer lay still beside an unfinished blade. No one left, but no one came. The door stayed shut. Chickens pecked through empty yards. Children played in silence, until they too vanished. Fields lay fallow, wells grew moss. The air, once thick with song and quarrel, hung heavy with nothing. A monk passing through a northern hamlet in 1351 wrote, "I heard only the wind, and the wheezing of a man too tired to pray." No masses were sung, no graves were dug deep. The dead outnumbered the living, and the earth was too hard. When they could, they buried them in groups. When they couldn't, they lit straw inside the house and walked away. They fought with fire, sometimes literal, always desperate. Boiled wine, salted water, vinegar inhaled through cloth. They drank potions of herbs, ash, and blood. They whispered charms while chewing garlic. Barbers bled the sick. Leeches clung to purple veins. Priests anointed trembling chests with holy water. Some hung iron horseshoes above beds. Others painted crosses in ash on doorframes. In Wales, healers buried dried weasels beneath the hearth, hoping the animal's spirit would drag the sickness down. When nothing worked, they muffled their coughs with wool, not to protect others, but to hide the sound. A healer in Flanders, Fontwine 12, wrote, I have seen more men die from the smoke of their own cure than from the sickness itself." But the line between healing and harm was thin, and most often it broke. The poor died first, but the rich followed. A peasant coughed into his sleeve, collapsed into straw, and never rose. A nobleman coughed into silk, beneath painted ceilings. But his breath failed him all the same. Wealth brought doctors, tinctures in silver flasks, woolen blankets. But it could not seal the air. Servants carried the sickness in. Clothes harboured it. Coins passed it hand to hand. A noblewoman, 1783, wrote to her sister, "I no longer let maids brush my hair, yet still I cough." In castles, the plague moved slower, room by room, but it moved. Tapestries muffled the sounds of death. When a lord fell ill, his household knelt, not to pray for his recovery, but to prepare for his passing. Death did not bow to titles. The cough did not ask your name. Some never cough, not once. They shared the same homes, the same beds, the same spoons, yet they stood while others fell. Historians now wondered, was it immunity? Or something simpler? Smokehouse workers rarely sickened. They breathed foul air daily. Tanners, blacksmiths, millers coughed, but they trudged on. Some drank herbal brews, others fasted. Some simply lived far from the road. A midwife, Fontino too, noted, those who washed with ash, water and hung rosemary at the door fared better. Coincidence? Perhaps. Or perhaps survival favoured the cautious, the isolated, the lucky. The truth? No one knew. The cough chose, and those it spared never stopped listening for its return. Spring brought green. Summer brought laughter. But by autumn, they listened again, for the faint sound across the courtyard, the cough near the oven, the child waking with a tight chest. It returned with the cold, with the fog, with windows sealed tight against winter. Villages rebuilt, new babies were born. But the old ones, the ones who remembered, kept herbs by the door, left shoes facing outward, marked walls with ash each October. A French priest, 1440, wrote each winter, "We bury a little of ourselves." Even when spared, the fear remained. It was no longer just a cough. It was memory, a shadow on the breath. They did not defeat it. They did not understand it. But they endured. They had no science, no names for bacteria. Only cloth at the windows, fires at their sides, prayers whispered over a child's fevered brow. They learned to live with it, to pass down stories, remedies, small acts of defiance. Not all worked, but they gave people something to hold, and sometimes that was enough. A widow, 1375, wrote, "I sang to the dark, not to chase it, but to remind myself I was still here." And so they sang, and so they wrapped themselves in fur, in ash, in faith. The cough took many, but not all. And when it came again, someone always remained, to light the fire. They had no medicine, no answers, but they had each other, and the will to keep breathing, even when breath itself became the enemy.